Good evening. Welcome. Going to do part 4 of wave flying in Scotland, and we've had 3 so far. This is the final one, and what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about flying a task, and I've got to go into screen mode to do my PowerPoint presentation. So I'll just click onto that and we'll get that started. Okay, so let's just go to the PowerPoint. Let's just see if that's come up. And doesn't appear to. So what's gone wrong there? Let's just try it again. Share. There we go. And we go to PowerPoint. And there we go from current slide. So I'll just hide that. And I'll get my little pointer. So all ready to go. Yeah, good evening to you all. I can see the messages on my other computer. So we're going to talk about wave flying in Scotland, and we're going to be talking about a task, and we'll just do a recap of what we covered last week. We spoke about crossing Airway November 560, which is really in the prime area for around Lochte. One of the things I forgot to mention is that if you've got a transponder, you don't actually have to talk to air traffic. I find it good practice just to maintain a listening watch, and if I'm crossing November 560 and they start talking about me, then I'll get in contact with them. But with a transponder, you don't need to be in radio contact. We spoke about the IAS TAS relationship just briefly, but Nick Norman brought up the points about the TAS increasing with height. So we're just going to cover that a little bit. And we covered task planning. And what we're going to talk about mainly today is what I'm going to use as an example is a 500 kilometer task that I did last year. And we'll just use that as an example. So this is a picture that I took. It's near Kerrymuir. It's using the wave coming off the Grampians, and I was trying to do a 300 kilometer out and return, which I did, but it wasn't as fast as I wanted to. But it was a beautiful day. Basically, I made a couple of mistakes and didn't fly as fast as I wanted to. And as I say, it's near Kerrymuir. Now, as I say, Nick brought up very valid points about the difference between the IAS and the TAS as we increase in altitude. And just to recap, the ASI is calibrated for ISA conditions. So basically, when the temperature is 15 degrees, when the air is cooling at 2 degrees per 1,000 feet, and when the sea level pressure is 1013.25 hectopascals, then the ASI is going to read the correct speed. And so basically at sea level, temperature 15, you can see that it's 90 knots. If we're at flight level 50, temperature is 5 degrees, and our true airspeed now is 6 knots, which is a 6% increase. 10,000 feet, starting to get a bit chilly, temperature's -5, and we've got a true airspeed of 105 knots, so that's a 15 knot increase, 16.7%. Flight level 150, -15, and we're looking at 113 knots, 23 knots difference. We obviously have to reduce our VNE as we get higher. And lastly, at flight level 200, I don't really climb above flight level 200. I very rarely do that. We're looking at a 34 knot difference between our indicator and our true airspeed. Now, the wind velocity is the true wind velocity. So obviously, the wind, because we're flying faster, the wind effect becomes less. Now, there are times when you do fly at altitude, and when the wind's not increasing with height, We get that on several occasions, or on a lot of occasions. And if we get into wave and the wave remains constant as we're going higher, and so it's not reducing with altitude, that's a good time to fly high. And again, when there are times when you have to jump a gap, when I did my when I did 750 last year, I had to do very high climbs to jump very big gaps. And again, you may need to do it to fly over cloud or to avoid cloud. And lastly, if you start high, if you started at, you take a good climb, you start high, and there's a good wave pattern, then obviously you do. But a lot of the time, the wave is marked in the lower levels, and so we have to fly at a lower level. Now, this picture actually, and before I go on to the picture, one of the points I'd make about doing a task in wave is that 68 knots, which is the best glide angle for the discus with water ballast, I got a glide angle of 1 in 43, and that'll give me 126 kph. So if I don't stop and I stay in lift, I can do the task at 126 kPa. So when we're looking at high speeds in wave tasks, it's not necessarily you're flying fast. What you're doing is you're not stopping, which is what we're going to be coming to later. Now, we discussed this IAS-TAS relationship, and this particular day on the 5th of April 2017, I did 2 500-kilometer flights, and John did 3 that day. And this picture is taken at, this is coming back from Hugh Head, and it's looking down the Dee Valley, or looking down to the southwest. Now, I'd come up on the penultimate leg of my final 500, and I was a bit worried about climbing I was a bit worried about, could I get round Hugh Head? It wasn't so much about getting round it, but how was I going to get back? And so I thought I'll take a climb here. And so on the way up, I got to this wave cloud, and it was constant lift, and the wind actually was 50 knots at 10,000 feet, and it remained the same all the way up. And I climbed to just over 13,000 feet, and that wave bar, the bottom of it, is at 13,000 feet. And it was constant, or constant lift all the way up. I then went round Hugh Head, but coming back, as you can see from the picture, I've got the low level wave. I've no need to climb back up here. The wave's going all the way back down there, so I've got a route all the way back down to Preef. So there wasn't any need on the way back. There was on the way up, but not on the way back. So when we're looking at basic rules for flying a wave task, the most important one is don't stop. You just got to keep going, unless you have to stop. But what you can do is you slow up and speed up as appropriate, as I've just pointed out. With water, 68 knots, 125 kph. So if you've got a surfeit of energy, you fly faster. If you need energy, you fly slower. The whole thing is not to stop. Just keep going. Obviously, what you've got to be doing is you've got to be looking well ahead and looking at your route and planning your route as you're going along. And obviously, height has an advantage with that, whereas if you're too low, then you can't see too far ahead. So again, what you've got to do is you've got to look well ahead, and basically all you've got to have at the end of the wave bar is a sufficient height to either get to the next wave bar or to jump. And that's where the skill really comes in. As I've just said, we want to jump, and with that in mind, what we do is we slow down in the strong lift, fly fast in the moderate lift, and if we're flying in sync, to say that you use McCready is not quite accurate, but basically what you're doing is you're flying at a sufficient speed to get across the next wave, to get across the next wave bar. You use the basic Macready, but into wind you're flying faster, and downwind you're going slow. What I tend to do is I tend to fly at around 120 knots to 125 knots if I'm jumping into wind. But if I'm going downwind, I actually fly at around 95 knots because obviously you've got the tailwind component. Lastly, with that in mind, what you've always got to do, as I've pointed out before, is always have an escape route. And on the flight that I'm going to be describing, there was times when I had to really think about that. Now, using those rules for this particular photograph, this was taken at a Boyne. I was flying from a Boyne a few years ago. And this is up around the Linadee, right up at the end, in the lee of the Cairngorms. And as you can see, the wind's blowing from left to right. And this is pretty nice wave. If you look at my airspeed indicator, I'm doing 85 knots indicated, and I'm flying in 0 sync. So I am cruising along. Now, a Boyne is actually up here. And the point is looking ahead is pretty obvious it's stonking lift here. And we've got these little bits sticking out, which are good indications. That's really, I mean, I look at a picture like that, I think, Jesus, that is so good. The problem with that is that I'm too high. I'm at 8,000, I'm about 8,000 feet. I'm far too high. If I get up to here, I'm going to be at VNE because that is stonking lift. There's a bridge, here's a bridge, a Boyne's up there. The aim is to get to a Boyne to be there at 4,000 feet for a nice gentle descent in there, but I'm far too high. I should be a lot lower and I should be using this energy. And I could use that energy all the way down. So I could quite easily fly well over in excess of 100 knots all the way down there. There we are, there's an example. Now, the task that I'm going to use is a flight that I did in January last year when I went from St Fillan's to Edsall and then to Loch Lomond Tarbet, back up to Fessa Cairn, and then finished at St Fillan's where I started. Now, I've just put up the basic wave pattern. What you've got is two basic hotspots. You've got the Lochte hotspot and you've got the Edsall hotspot. And the wave, what we've got here is that it's what I call the Lochte Arc. When you get up to Edsall, Fessa Cairn area, there is often a wave bar. You've got the wave bar in the lee of the Cairngorms, sorry, the Grampians, and you get this Lochte Arc, which goes all the way around Lochte, and it's actually quite useful to use that at times. But down here, what we've got, you've got the wave bars coming off Lochte, and you've got these valleys here, Loch Earn, and you've got another one here. So the wave tends to orientate to a certain degree. It tends to follow the shape of the terrain underneath you. But what we've also got is this gap, which is the Lochte gap. So that's just an overview of the wave pattern. That's the actual task, what I actually flew, and I've used CU and I've put it into the, I've used the trace that shows the speed trace. And so what I'll do is I'll break it down into each individual leg. And basically, I did the task at a speed of 137.6 kph, 140 handicap, and it won the Frank Foster Trophy and the Manio Cup Trophy last year. And the thing is I made a big mistake on this leg here, which we'll talk about, because it could have been a lot faster, and we'll discuss that. So that's what it actually looked like. And so we can see Lochte, hotspot, wave going downwind of it. You see these furry looking clouds here, that's high level cloud, and there's a high level cloud there. So it's all stretching back nicely to get it from Port Moke. We've got the Edsall wave bar, and they're not very well marked, wasn't very good that day, is the Lochte Arc. coming down to here. And over here, we've got Loch Lomond Tarbes, and we can see little bits of wave here, a bit blue here. And obviously, there's the Lochte Gap. So that's the actual picture. And if we look at the shadows of the cloud, we can see that it's about 2 o'clock. It's around 2-ish. So it's relatively late in the day. It's towards the end of the flight that I had. Okay. So if we look at the legs, so here's the speeds of the individual legs. That's the high point, 11,627 feet. Here's the circling, and here's the average ground speed and the indicated airspeed. So I'll just enlarge those. So we can see the leg speeds. As I say, we've got the high point. Leg 1 was at 141 kph. Not bad. Leg 2 was quite good, 152 kph. Leg 3, I messed it up for reasons that I'll explain. So that's quite slow. And leg 4, back to St. Fillan's, was 146 kph. Now I've said, keep going, don't stop. Total circling time, 1 minute 28 seconds. And tries, that's turning left and right, 1 minute 48. If we look at the glide angles, the interesting point here is that the average ground speed and the indicated air speeds are pretty much the same. So what you can see is that I'm flying slightly slower. Well, the total average speed, you can see that I'm flying slower in rising lift and flying faster in the sink. Supposedly 2 glides. This is not really, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that. Now, just taking these figures, total turning time is 1.4%, because the total time was 3 minutes 16 seconds. Now, coming back to our speeds, as I say, 120 kph was just slightly below best LD. Just to use it as an example, that's 2 kilometers a minute. That means that if you do a turn, a 30-second turn, you're going to lose 1 kph per hour. So just taking these figures, the potential task speed, if we take out that turning, was 139 kph, whereas my actual task speed was just on 137. Now, that's not the whole story, because what you're doing a lot of the time when you're flying wave is that when you're in lift, you may do a few beats, and these tend not to turn up in these statistics. And I'll show you that later when we come to the individual legs. So here we're looking at the first leg, and I hope this is not going to be too boring, but basically what I did was I've got the leg, I've put the high points in black, and I've put the low points in blue. And what I've done for the low point, I've put the maximum climb rate. Now you can, that's the maximum that I got, which will be intermittent. And so really what you can say is that if you halve it, that will give you the rate of climb when I was at my low point. So as you can see, what it's a series of is climbs and descents, climbs and descents. When I took off from Portmouth, I came up to Lochte, and I had a look at Lochte just to see if it was working, and it was. So obviously this is my downwind to start. So I start at Edsall, correction, start at St. Fillan's at 7,600 feet. I can see the wave bar there, and so up to this point at point 1, I've climbed up to a max altitude of 7,800 feet. I then do a dive along the wave bar, gradually coming down, and then I do a little bit of a climb here, and I get to my lowest point and there is a wave bar just here, and I get basically a 4-knot climb. And so from point 2 to 3, I'm climbing, no turning at all, and I go up to 7,200 feet. Next dive along the next wave bar, and I've gone down to about 5,500 feet, and then I've really slowed down here, because you can see it's quite blue, right? Or the trace is blue, and so I've got a good bit of lift here, and I go up to 8,000 feet, and I can't go too high because here's the airway, and that's flight level 85. So there's no point climbing to then have to descend to get beneath the airway. So what I'm doing is I'm basically just flying along as fast as I can, get to a point here where I can see the good climb, keeping below flight level 885, and then the run into Edsel. So that's basically the first leg at 141 kph. I've now got it sorted out for coming out. If I go to the next slide. So unfortunately, we're still doing the lift profile from left to right, but obviously we're traveling from right to left here. And basically what I'm doing is I'm flying along the wave bar pretty well, as you can see here, going as fast as I can. So here I'm at 8,000 feet, and then I do a bit of a jump to the next wave bar, because the wave bars are a bit orientated like that, which will create a problem later on. And what I do here is, as I say, I've dived across the wave bar, I get to the wave bar, and I do a zoom climb. So really good wave bar here, where I've got at times 15 knots. And then it's another dash along it, getting a bit low here. And I'm now down to around here, and I'm crossing the Tay Gap, and I'm having to just meander my way across. I'm not going across particularly fast, and I join the next wave bar. And then it's a climb, and then up to about 8,000 feet. And then it's a dive to get onto the Lochte bar. And now I'm just going to cruise climb on here. And this is the hot spot. And this is where what I'm doing is I'm looking down here. Remember the satellite photograph? I can see it's all pretty blue here, all along here. So what I'm saying to myself is I've got to be careful here. There's a wave cloud that I can see here. And so basically, I'm not going across. What I'm doing is trying to use as much energy as I'm going along the wave bar there. And so I get to there, get a little bit of a climb at 0.8 off a little wave bar, and then a dive into Loch Lomond Tarbit. And on the way into that dive, on the ways I'm going across there, then I come across a little wave bar that I think I'll use on the way back out. So all the time I'm planning ahead and working ahead. I'm just going to draw the blind because I can see my face is being scarred by sunlight. So okay, right. So to carry on with that, let's put it into context with some pictures. So this is where we left the Petacane wave bar. As you can see, what's difficult about this? Now, you can see that there is no advantage in climbing high because there's no way the wave isn't particularly well marked. So, really, I have to say at reasonably low levels. But really, all you do is just fly along to the end of the wave bar, looking ahead to see where the next one is, and then diving for it. Not exactly rocket science. This is now coming up to Lochte, which is the hot spot. I've crossed the Tay Gap, the A9 Tay River Gap, and I'm coming up to Lochte. There it is down there. And the things that I'm really interested in is I can see these puffy little clouds there. That's a nice edge there. and it's obvious that it's working. So I can get 10, 11, well, I can get a lot more. I can go up 15, 16,000 feet with that. No problems at all. So we just fly along it. And this is what I'm doing. And I'm cruise climbing. I'm a happy bear here, 105 knots, and I'm still going up. But I'm not going to start pulling back until I get to about here, which is opposite that higher level cloud. And it's a privilege to fly on conditions like on days like that. Just to look, you know, it's spectacular looking at the shadow of the wave bar on Ben Law. And, you know, this is paradise. I mean, this is just great stuff. And what I'm going to do is just fly along at 105 knots until I get to a good bit of lift and then climb and then carry on. So that's basically where I am, climbing along there. And as I can say, there's the wave bar just to the south of Crane Larrick. What I'll do is I'll get my height and speed, and then off we go. Chances are it's going to be weak lift along here as well, because just because the cloud's not there doesn't mean that the wave's not there. It's just not marked. So I take the a little climb there, because 6,000 feet is not particularly high to be at Loch Lomond Tarbet. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to have a little fiddle about, and I'm going to show you a video of John showing you an example of how we use a wave bar to keep the speed up. This is my favorite picture. I mean, this is just a classic day with this lovely rotary wave here. Absolutely beautiful. Now, on a day like this, it might well be a good idea to fly high, because the wave's marked at altitude. Depends on what you need to do. What you do is you take the conditions and you use them to your maximum advantage. So let me just bring it up. What I have to do is I have to press escape. Okay, let me just do that. I have to go to, I'll just get rid of that, and I'll just go to the first slide. And this is John. He's flying. I'll just start it. I've had to take the sound off so that I can talk over it. Okay. So basically, he's to the southeast of Comrie, underneath the TMA, or is underneath Papa Sector A of Papa 600. He's just north of the TMA. He can't fly. John can't fly higher than flight level 55, and he's flying along the wave bar. And the important things to look is the good lift is where little bits of puffy cloud are ahead of the wave bar. So we'll just play it. Okay. As I say, there's no sound. And if we look at the vario, he's doing 4 knots. That's the netto. He's actually only climbing at 1. It's doing 105 knots. Okay. So very slowly climbing, staying below the airway. And he clears it in a minute. We're just at the bottom end of November 560. Obviously, at the weekends, that airspace is opened up. You can see it on the map, his position. It's just coming up to the edge of the airway there. So the netto is showing 4. He's climbing along at 1 knot, 4,300 feet altitude. And the speed's gradually increasing as he's going past the cloud there. Now, John's just waiting because he's looking well ahead at these clouds here. And that's the point that John wants to start climbing. And this is to a similar extent what I was doing on Lochte. So speed's increasing now, coming up to 120 knots. And there's that where it's marked. And in a moment, as he gets to beam that cloud, we start to see there's the lift starting to climb now. 6 knots on the netto, 8 knots, coming up to 10 knots, still doing 115 knots, still waiting. Let's extract the maximum out of this. Here we are, getting up to 9 knots now. And there they are. There's these puffy clouds. This is where all the good lift is. And You can see Comrie just down there on the right there, and that's the next wave bar which John will want to jump later on, and which we'll have a look at. And there we go. So now he's starting to climb. He's clear of the airway, and this is now starting to use the energy, get a fast climb, and then speed up when he's got the height that he wants, and then he's off again. Now, John flew down to the Mull of Kintyre and Arran on this day. Absolutely terrific. 9 knots, climbing along. Its speed's come back to 80 knots now. So there we go. Absolutely fantastic. Beach thermals. Okay, I'll close that, and we'll go back to my presentation. Right, what we were talking about. Obviously, I went fast, just like John, along that wave bar, came down. I got to here, and I'm only about 6,000 feet. And I'm really thinking to myself, this is not a particularly brilliant situation. The ground here is about 3,000 feet. So there's not a lot of wriggle room. So I've got to be a wee bit careful. Now, you've got the wave bar at Lochte, you've got the wave bar down at St Fillan's, and basically it's a matter of me making my way across. So if I go to the next one, as you can see, what I did was that I turned Loch Lomond Tarbes at 6,000 feet, and I passed a wave bar on the way down, so I went back to it and just over 5,000 feet. As I say, I'm pretty aware that I've got to have my escape route. And at the end here, there's some fields as well, but I'm really quite alert as to if things go wrong, I've got to be able to get out of this area quite easily. And that's the thing that's in the back of my mind all the time. So halfway along, I get a little climb up to 6,000 feet, but then it's back down, and basically I'm bumping along the bottom, but I can see the wave bar at St Fillan's, and basically I get onto it, and it's a really good climb, about 9 knots, and I climb to 10,000 feet. And that's what I'm looking at when I'm at St Fillan's. And the point that I was making earlier, which I've already repeated, is that, as I say, I'm about 6,000 feet. I'm looking up at the Lochte bar. If the cloud's not very well marked, you can always tell what the lift is by looking up the next wave bar upwind, because that's giving you a good indication of what the lift is going to be like on the wave bar you're on. And it's a technique that I use quite a bit. Okay, to carry on, had a really good climb after a reasonable crossing. As I say, even if I'm doing 70 knots, I'm doing more than 125 kph. The important thing is not to stop. I've now got up to 9,000 feet, and now I just run along a really good wave bar, going all the way to Methlin, and I end up there at 10,000 feet. So that's a really fast bit. So I'm hammering it by now. I've got to cross the Lochte, I've got to cross the Tay gap, and so off I go to point 6, and that's just the dirty dive across to pick up the next wave bar, and then again a climb to 7,000 feet. And this is where it went wrong, because I'm looking up at Fettercairn, and there's a wave. The wave bar is now orientated this way, and we've got the airway here at flight level 85, and I can't fly over it. And this bit of airspace is flight level 55, so I've got an issue. I'm not going to be able to get to Fettercairn. This wave bar is just wrong. And so what I do is I take a dive downwind, and I go down to about 6,000 feet, and I join the next wave bar at Montrose. And here I climb to 11,000 feet, and I do a dive, There's cloud here, so I go around the edge. I'm actually on a wave bar. There's a wave bar here, which I'm climbing along, and that's my entry and exit into Vatican. That cost about 21 minutes. So taking into account this bit here and a bit more to get to Vatican, that actually cost me about 21 minutes. And so I should have been doing about 100, that leg should have been about 165 to 170 kph. And if I had managed to do that, the task would have been done at 152 kph. As it was, because I had to take that detour, and these things happen and you just have to sort it out. It's a shame. So while we're talking about that, as we can see, here's a picture of it. What's happening is you've got the two wave bars, the Lochte Arc, or what I call the Lochte Arc, and the Edsel wave bar merging at that point. As you, from the photographs, you can see that the track lines don't necessarily connect up with the wave bars because that's the wave moves up and down as the day progresses. Now, what I'm going to do now is to give you an example of showing what it's like to cross a wave bar, again using John's flight as an example. And I hope this time I won't mess it up. So what I'll have to do is to escape again, and we'll go to there, and we're there now, and go to presentation, and this is the one for John. So where we are here is it's just a bit further on. John's gone past Comrie, he's climbed up and is coming. What he wants to do is to jump upwind onto the next wave bar. And so we'll just start it. So you can see he's about 7,500 feet and he's doing 135 knots and he's in 14 knots sink. And there's the wave bar up ahead. And it's going for the gap. 17 knots to sink. And this is what happens. You've got to have the height. You can see on the map there is over Loch Arc, passing 5,300 feet now. It's just going to get through the gap there, or maybe go through a bit of cloud. And what he does is he keeps speed up all the way along. Keeps going. Again, wait until he's got the maximum lift before he starts to slow down. So you can see the lift is now starting to, or the sink is now starting to reduce. Sink's reducing, still keeping the speed up, still doing about 135, 140 knots. There's the lift going up now. Still keeping the speed on. And now it's just coming onto the wave edge. And this is the bit that I always love. I think it's just fantastic when you do it. A lot of shaking about because it's a bit bumpy at this point and has been through a bit before. Climbing away now. There we are, 7, 8 knots. And there he is looking up the wave bar. And he's just going to bomb along that. That's heaven. That's heaven. They just fly along it fast. As I see, it's just south of November 560. Climb along in 7 knots, cruising. Most shall be at about 110 knots. So there we go. Now, I won't mess it up this time. Let's go and sort it out. That's better. My apologies again. Okay. So, as I say, I'm just looking here. Makes me want to fly. No perfect day is going to be absolutely perfect. That would be too easy. Yeah, that's not a bad day, though. That's not a bad day. So, we've had all the problems of getting in and out of Vatican. So, again, what we are, let me just get my pointer again. So, we've had the entry, and now we're coming out. As I say, there's wave bar up here, but now I'm on a bit of a wave bar, and basically shoot along it. This is flight level 85, and basically I get to this low point here from about 6,000 feet, and then I take a little gentle climb to point 2, where I'm at about 7,000 feet, and then again it's flying along a wave bar, but then I lose it and I have to dive down, and I'm not in a very good situation here because I'm coming up to the Lochte bar, or sorry, the Tay gap, and I'm getting a wee bit low here. Perfectly safe terrain because we've got lots of landable fields in the A9 Valley there, and basically this slows me down a bit. I've been quite fast along here, but what's happening here, and this is where I say the statistics on the first page that we looked at is not quite true, because what I'm doing here is beating, and my average lift, you see, the max I got was 7.5, so we're looking at about 3 or 4 knots. It's not very good, but I've got to jump this gap to get onto wave bars that I can see here. So I have to do a bit of a climb to get across. So basically, as you can see, it's quite close together because I'm beating, and I climb quite slowly up to about not quite 6,000 feet, and that's enough height to jump. So I've crossed the Tay gap now, and now I'm on the wave bar, and it's just a matter get up to my maximum height, which is going to get me to my finish point with adequate height, so I don't break the 1,000-meter rule. And so it's just a welly in. And in fact, when I got here, there was just too much lift. I was going along at V&E to to get there as quickly as possible. As you can see, I just carried on climbing once I passed the turn point. So that was that 500, and that's a typically fast 500, and basically big mistake in it. So it could always be fast. There's always these nub points in a task where things don't go right, and you just have to power on through them and keep going. So that's about it basically for today. Just looking at the satellite picture, as I say, you can see we're basically using the same bar there. Here on that leg, I've gone north, and basically got a bit of cloud here to jump onto here. The positions are slightly different as the day progresses, and then it's straight in. And it really is a matter, I find, of looking at sat pictures, getting an idea of the pattern. So a summary of what we've done, because this is the last one that I'm doing, and basically there's 5 gliding clubs in Scotland. We got the Highland Gliding Club with the RAF GSA former gliding club also being there, and they get wave in anywhere from west to southwesterly wave. You've got Cairngorm, it's fantastic ridge site, get wave I mean, the problems with Cairngorm is that in easterlies it affects the field, where you've got good wave, again, southwesterly all the way around to north. Deeside, 7-day-a-week club in the summer, and of course ourselves, and then Dumfries and Galloway. The whole purpose of the series of talks was to give basically an idea of what flying's like in Scotland. And we started off with the overview and our playground, the setting of boundaries. Remember I told you about the database that Phil Dolan's updated. It's available on the SGU website now. Part 2, we covered aircraft performance and interpreting MET. Part 3, we covered airspace, path setting. And part 4, obviously, we've just been talking about flying the task. So that's about it from me. There's one thing I'll finish off on. A question was asked last week about icing. And I mean, the example there was John flying through the wave bar. On that day, temperature was above 0. Basically, icing can be an issue. I mean, there are times that you dive through wave bars. I mean, where you're going to get your worst icing basically is from about -10 to 0. That's when the water droplets are relatively large, and as a result, you get rime ice. And obviously, the longer you're going to be in cloud, the more ice you're going to pick up. But if it's just a couple of minutes, you get a bit of ice, and it tends to sublimate away. But I would be careful about that, because it can take quite a long time to get off, particularly if you've got a lot of it. If you're descending through cloud and the aircraft is cold soaked, I have had it where I've descended through cloud and come out. Obviously, got a cloud flying endorsement, but I've come out of cloud and the outside of my canopy have been iced up. It's only happened to me once, but luckily the cloud base was about 3,500 feet. Temperature actually was about -3, so it's perfect conditions for the creation of ice. And I had to wait for the canopy to clear, but I had enough time for that. So icing is an issue. So I'll go to my other computer and see what questions. Why was it a mistake? No, it wasn't a mistake. It was just, you can't help wondering. You can't help wondering because it is over a year ago. You just have to make the best of what you can. From that point of view, let's just go up through the questions. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I'm sorry about the mess. Yeah, okay. What transponder batteries do you use? I've got a Trig transponder because it's British. And I use a lithium battery, lithium-ion battery, and I have it purely for I've got 3 batteries in the glider. I've got a big battery for the engine, and I've got 2 lithium batteries, one which is purely for the transponder, and I think I'll get 10 hours out of it. All right, anything else? Any other questions? Right. I think the next wave talk is by Chris Gill, and he's going to be talking about wave flying for beginners, because it is the important bit is getting into it, and for that I'd say take an aerotow. Anything else? Yeah, you can access the webinars if you go on to the BGA YouTube website. All the webinars are on there, and you can play them, and they're on there for perpetuity. One of the reasons that I did this series is that basically the idea is that people can go back to them in the future. If you're coming up to Scotland, you can just have a look at these webinars and get an idea of what it's like flying up here. So they're there, and they're available. They're available for you to use. They're available for you to have a look at. They're there in perpetuity, or as long as the internet lasts. Also, the airspeed is quoted in IAS or TAS. They're TAS. Their actual ground speed. Actually, they're showing the speed of the task. So it's actually the ground speed. So if I did the task at 107 kph, that was my ground speed. My speeds that I fly from, as I say, if we're flying at 68 knots indicated, that will give you 125 kph indicated. But obviously, the higher you go, the greater that TAS is, or the difference between your indicated and your TAS. But all the task speeds are in ground speed. You know what you've done, if you see my point. Right, how are we doing? Okay, Andy, Lincoln and Ray and Colin sort of typing now. Well, unfortunately, I tend not to use the Netto, to be quite honest. I've got an S8, I've got an S80 in my glider, and but really, what I'm interested in is I'm not. I look at the Vario, but I mean, obviously, if you've got 50 knots down, it can be a bit frightening at times. 50 knots up, it's great. But what I tend to do is I tend to look at where I'm going and basically seeing whether I'm going to make it. Am I going to make it? You can see you're coming down. At the end of the day, what you've got to do is get to the other side. And basically, in my discus, I'm either going, I'm doing about. I don't tend to fly faster than 120 knots, 125, because if you go faster than 125s in the discus, you're really on the far end of the drag curve and you're falling out. When John was showing his crossing a wave bar, one of the points about that is that if I was doing that in a discus, I'd need about an extra 1,000 feet. These aircraft like the Antaras, the high performance gliders, that's where they come into their own, because at high speed they can just flash along and they've got a good glide angle. But where the discus tends to run out is towards the high speed end. And what I'm looking at is I'm looking at my wave bar, or the point that I'm going. If it's going up the screen, I'm not going to make it. And if it's going down the screen, I'm going to make it. And if it's staying where it is, I'm okay. And that's what I'm looking at. You don't need the instruments. You can tell by just looking outside. Next question. Okay. Yeah. When flying near VD, do you worry about hitting rotor? You can usually tell. I mean, the thing, Alistair Much and myself, I showed you on my first lecture some forward braking wave, and there Alistair and myself flew through some clear air turbulence, which was extremely rough. Alistair got quite concerned. I wasn't happy, and I was well above max manoeuvring. The thing one has to do is not make rapid control inputs. Whatever you do is do everything slowly, ease the speed back, don't make any rapid movements, and so on. I mean, not being sort of, I am risk averse, but one of the sort of things that you have to say to yourself is that the safety factors on on certification are a minimum of 1.3. So any speeds that you have, VNE, you can add 1.3 to that. I don't fly above VNE or anything like that because I'm not a test pilot. These speeds are there for a reason, but there are safety factors on them, and gliders are very, very strong. If before you get to ultimate loads, talking about things that, at extremes, before you get to ultimate load factors, I mean, if you take something like the 787, the 787 is designed to break. Its ultimate load factor is 4.6, I think it is. I think it's around there, 4.6 or 4.8. Well, 4.65 or 4.85, it breaks. It's been designed to those parameters. Whereas something like a glider, you've got the safety factors of 1.3, but the ultimate load factors are something like about, the glider is certified to about 5.5 G. The ultimate load factor is about 13, 14 G. And obviously, if you've been flying through some severe turbulence and so on, I mean, you're going to, if you did fly to such an extent that you damage the glider, you would see the wrinkling or whatever. I've never had anything like that. And I don't think in the UK the conditions are so bad that it's going to create structural damage. I think if you're operating in the Andes or the Alps or in the Sierra Nevadas, places like that, there you stand a chance of doing damage to your glider. But I think the turbulence that one has in the UK, although very, very unpleasant at times, I don't think it's going to lead to structural failure unless you're being really stupid. So I think that answers that. Okay. All right. Oh yeah, this is Alistair was flying an 18-meter discus when he hit clear air turbulence, so it would have been worse for him. Whereas I was in a 15-meter discus. Why do I stick with a distance? Because I can't afford anything else. It's like a dog. I bought it for life. I'm 69 now, and I'll keep it until I can't fly anymore. Well, it's coronavirus business. Once all that's sorted, then I'm sure we can sort something out for the person that asked to fly dual. Okay, I think that's about it, really. How long have I been going? So it's just over an hour. Whoops, somebody else is just typing. Yeah, okay, good one, David. Structures, yes. VNE margin only 5%. Good point. Okay, right. That's about it then. So let's see what Skill's got to say. I'm sure it'll be interesting stuff. See you soon, guys.
Thanks very much, Sant.